Well, if you need to, Matt, you can always come over here. We've got hazy IPAs as far as the eye can see, each one with a higher alcohol content than the last. I can only extrapolate that the eventual goal is to hand you a thimble full of dry hops that immediately puts you into a coma.
Wow, you do realise that could dwarf chicken nuggets as your biggest export?
That might actually be a good thing. It takes forever to get properly drunk off of chicken nuggets, you know?
Hello everyone out there on YouTube, Spotify and indeed any other platform you're enjoying this content. My name is Matt Johnston. I host a show called The Interesting Times on YouTube, and I have one half of this podcast called A Very Special Relationship. And the cookie to my biscuit, donut to my scone, and indeed iced tea to my high tea is Andrea Bridges-Smith, host of the Fenix, not Phoenix, but Fenix, F-E-N-I-X, News Network. Hi, Andrea.
Hello, everyone.
So, Andrea, before we begin, I just wish to wish you a happy summer's solstice from here in the UK, depending, of course, on when this goes out. But the Druids are all off to Stonehenge to sacrifice a muggle to the god of Hogwarts. So, it is the longest day here. And honestly, Andrea, don't our leaders make us, rest of us, feel like that's the way every day?
Yes, that really is their superpower. So, Matt, how is the summer treating you so far? I heard that things have gotten quite hot over there, although you and I may have slightly different definitions of what constitutes a hot day.
Ah, right. Well, we are experiencing some really warm weathers, not only on the land, but indeed on the coastlines around the UK. I'm sure you've seen those maps, you know, with the large red blotches all over the place.
Right.
Yeah, a bit concerning. Although this is believed to be only temporary. But with the energy prices going sky high, I thought I'd make the most of it by only brewing my tea in the Thames, with the added bonus that the water I use from the Thames is already brown before I've even added a tea bag.
And you know, the irony of that is it kind of feels like the sun is teabagging us right now. Do you guys have that expression over there?
Yes, we do. I got a feeling we got you Americans to thank you for that particular expression.
Well, you're welcome. We're happy to give back.
I see that the UK is not the only one dealing with extreme weather. You guys, well, Americans, and in particular Texans, you're getting some crazy weather as well, right?
Yes, we are also having a bit of fun with the old global warming. So first, I'm curious, what is the high supposed to be in London today? What's it going to feel like over there?
The high is 25 degrees, that's Celsius, which I believe is 77 degrees Fahrenheit. There we go.
Okay, great. So a little bit different here. The high today here in Austin, Texas is expected to be 104 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 40 degrees Celsius. So just slightly warmer over here. But honestly, that's not that unusual for us in the summertime. And after 42 years of Texas summers, I consider myself an expert, and I have some tips for getting through the heat if you need them. Would that be helpful to you?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Yes, please. Hit me with them.
All right. First, buy the biggest air conditioner that you can lay hands on. Then buy a second one to have in case the first one breaks down. You're going to want 2 of those, okay?
Right. It sounds expensive, but yeah, go on.
It's outrageously expensive, but worth every penny. Secondly, stay in the water all of the time. So ideally, you would have a bathtub full of ice water going day and night, and then you just stay in there until you're as chilly as Walt Disney's head.
Right. Could a walk-in fridge help with that? Now, Boris Johnson famously hid in one before the last election to avoid scrutiny.
Well, you know, I have to ask, was he hiding or was he just cooling off a little bit? But, you know, knowing him, he was probably hiding from all manner of sins.
All right, well, here we go. Well, as you know, he walked away the other week rather than face his responsibilities, which is actually very unlike him. Normally, he runs away without facing his responsibilities. But in his absence, the House of Commons found him guilty of lying to the House of Commons, which is fair. He lies to everybody. Why should they be left out?
Right.
But what was interesting was that Rishi Sunak, in case you didn't know, and I imagine viewers from all over the world, including the UK, wouldn't know he's actually our Prime Minister, he decided not to vote as he didn't want to upset the Tory faithful, who are in love with Johnston still. And yes, I can see the irony in having a group supporting Johnson being referred to as faithful. But it begs the question, who's running the country? Anyway, rant over, beg your pardon, back to the cooling off.
Yes, a very good rant though. Right, so another tip for you, only go outside between the hours of 4 a.m. and 7 a.m. unless you have a traveling ice bath that you can take with you while you walk the dog. Now, you'll want to have an ice guy on speed dial, and you'll need to make sure that his mother's favorite dessert is ready for him every time he comes by so that he keeps you first in the rotation. You know, you scratch his back, he'll freeze yours.
Right. That's a fascinating insight into the secret lives of ice guys, which I presume are guys that just have ice rather than some sort of mutant hybrid mock-up.
Right.
Yeah, well, all this crazy weather is perhaps showing us that drag queen story time maybe isn't the most horrifying problem facing our children.
Oh, I don't know about that, Matt. Obviously, a drag queen reading a story to a child is way worse than having them bake alive in their own air. So it's really good that we're focusing on that. One last heat tip that I will give you. Don't advertise that you're sitting in an ice bath. You know, don't post about it on Instagram or social media or anything unless you want your kidneys harvested. That one's a rookie mistake.
Right.
So now that we've covered the weather, I suppose we ought to move on to politics, yes?
Yes. So, Andrea, if I may, I see that Joe Biden in a Twitter tweet the other day, bizarrely, finished off a speech by saying, "God save the Queen." Now, I'm not sure if anybody told old Joe that God kind of dropped the ball on that one. Maybe a bit of context is missing, probably. Have you seen it? Was he joking? Have to say, maybe not the funniest joke he's ever made.
Well, you know, we don't really know what Joe Biden is talking about half the time. And, you know, it turns out his staff doesn't either. The only reason that I can think of for him to say such a thing is that he was traveling back through time to the not so very distant past and trying to get Liz to stick around a bit longer, but then he ended up back in the present day because one of his spark plugs misfired or something in the time machine. I don't know. Usually when something doesn't make sense, Occam's razor suggests that it's time travel.
Right, so he jumped in his DeLorean and then drove off at the wrong time or something.
Yes, exactly. If you're using, an alarm clock from the 1980s instead of your Apple Watch, you know, sometimes things can get fuzzy on the time destination. So, speaking of maybe being drunk, Matt, I've heard that British brewers are lowering the amount of alcohol in their beers as a result of inflation, which made me a little bit worried about you. Are you still able to get properly drunk after a football match?
After, during, and indeed before are apparently all acceptable forms of getting drunk and watching any sporting occasion, let's be honest. Of course, I'm guessing at this as I don't really watch or get invited to football matches, and I'll be honest, I like it that way. So, interestingly, one of the reasons it's believed that beer is going up is because of Brexit. Now, one of its most vocal supporters is a chap called Tim Martin, who just happens to own Wetherspoons, which is a chain of pubs here in the UK. And he's now predicting £10 a pint of beer before too long. So at least someone's getting something out of Brexit.
Well, it's a shame it's not you, but I don't see that changing in the foreseeable future.
No.
Well, if you need to, Matt, you can always come over here. We've got hazy IPAs as far as the eye can see, each one with a higher alcohol content than the last. I can only extrapolate that the eventual goal is to hand you a thimble full of dry hops that immediately puts you into a coma.
Wow, you do realise that could dwarf chicken nuggets as your biggest export?
That might actually be a good thing. It takes forever to get properly drunk off of chicken nuggets, you know?
Yeah, and that's even with the dipping sauce, right?
Yeah, we really should put more booze in those dipping sauces. So Matt, moving on to some royal news, which I know is your favorite. It sounds like Harry and Meghan did not live up to their podcast obligations with Spotify. What do you make of that?
I feel like I'm incredibly unqualified to speak about this. Honestly, I don't know what to make of it. I never listened to the podcast. I didn't watch the Netflix series. I tend to look at royals and even ex-royals the same way, you know, like the old-fashioned view of children. You know, the one where they say that they should be seen but not heard. I have the same approach to royals, yes.
Gotcha.
But one thing I do know is that it was a particularly warm day at something called the Trooping of the Colour last Saturday. Have you heard of this, Andrea?
No, what on earth is that?
The Trooping of the Colour is basically where we frighten the rest of the world by displaying our military might of several thousand men on horseback with shiny swords and elaborate headgear fashioned from some endangered animals, all being saluted by a 74-year-old man who clearly would rather be anywhere else.
That sounds like an excellent use of everyone's time. So is it really called the Trooping of the Colour?
Yeah, it's to do with the fact that you've got the colours on display. You're trooping them. That's the idea, the thinking, yes.
You know, every time I think I have heard the most British thing ever, here comes another one to replace it. I really thought we had reached the zenith with the coronation swords of, infinite fuckitude or whatever, but this is even better. So, good job showing off your military might and prowess. We prefer to show ours off by pouring a giant silo full of money directly into the middle of the Pentagon. That's what that little space in the middle is for.
That's what it's for. All right. Well, yeah. I see, Andrea, by the way, that Hunter Biden has pleaded guilty to 2 misdemeanors on tax and gun ownership. I have to ask, how is it possible to have a misdemeanor on gun ownership in the US, unless they meant he was charged for not having one? And speaking of tax dodging, any more news on Trump, who, let's face it, dodges taxes like Neo dodges bullets?
Well, first I'll start with Hunter Biden. So Hunter didn't pay his taxes for a couple of years on account of being a scumbag during that time. He has now paid the taxes, but later than he should have, and now he is on probation for that. The gun thing is because there's a law saying you can't own a gun if you're a drug user, and he did, which is bad. So
wow.
That's, yeah.
Well done on having boundaries.
Well, we have a boundary. I think we have one boundary on guns, and it's that one. I wouldn't say we had multiple boundaries.
Right.
In fact, there's actually a case before the Supreme Court right now about a law that bars domestic abusers from having firearms. Now, most sane human beings would say, that's a great idea, let's not let them do that. But there are actually some people fighting back, and they're the ones saying, this guy beat his wife, let's put a Glock in his pocket for safekeeping. I don't know why anyone would ever have that point of view, but that is the beauty and wonder that is America. It's a rich frickin' tapestry.
Yeah.
So on to Trump. So his trial date in the classified documents case is set for August. So please make sure that you have bought plenty of popcorn before then.
Oh yeah, stocking up.
But this week, Trump did an interview where he offered yet another excuse. For those of you keeping track, so far he has said the documents weren't classified, and if they were, that he declassified them by aligning his chakras and pointing his chi in the direction of those boxes, and then poof,
Is this like a priest does with holy water? Bless it, and there it's classified.
Exactly. So after you've been president, you have some presidential magic residue kind of stuck to your fingers for a little while. And so you can use that to just declassify things at will. His, of course, is orange from the Cheeto dust.
I was going to say, residue, I'm not going to ask any more questions on that one. Thank you.
Yes, nor should you. Those have been some of his previous arguments. Now the argument is that he needed more time to go through all the boxes where the classified documents were found because he had some golf shirts mixed in there. And, Matt, whomst among us hasn't kept our Iranian uranium enrichment dossier right there next to our football cleats? Common sense storage method brought to you by whoever the opposite of Marie Kondo is.
All right, well, okay. Let's go for this then. Football cleats. What are football cleats?
So they're same thing as soccer cleats. So they're these shoes that have little pointy bits on the bottom to help you grip onto the turf.
Yeah, boots. Football boots.
Football boots. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
We're learning stuff each episode, aren't we? This is wonderful. Separated
do
by a
this
common
show.
language. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, yes. This show is very educational, first and foremost. People learn a lot from it. And the other thing that kind of reached out to me about this defense was the fact that he's saying he was too busy. He didn't have enough time to go through these boxes. And I'm looking at how often this guy plays golf, and I'm saying, why did you not have enough time to take your golf shirts out of the, piss-stained Ukrainian defense plan? That doesn't really make a lot of sense to me.
It doesn't really, does it? I mean, we've all been there. We've all moved to a new address and we're like, oh, we'll deal with that in a little while, you know what I mean? But that tends to be trophies, doesn't it? Rather than, as you say, classified documents.
Right, yeah. Grandma's China can go ahead and stay in the boxes for a bit, but let's go ahead and get the nuclear secrets where they need to go. You got to do a little triage, right?
Right, absolutely.
All right, well, that is all the time that we have for this week. Matt, it's always good to see you.
And you.
And we will be back next week, but in the meantime, if you start to feel lonely without us, head on over to @TheInterestingTimes UK on YouTube to check out Matt's show, and @Fenix News Network, that's FENIX, for a fresh new episode of News Plus Comedy every Friday. Thanks for watching and listening, and we will see you next time.
Cheerio.